Well, hello everyone. I want to start this week by returning to last week's assignment. As you've probably noticed, the submissions didn't quite turn out the way that I had hoped. Not because you didn't try, but because of the way I designed the assignment, as it wasn't clear or aligned as it should have been. And here's the truth. That's on me. Now here's something else that I want to name clearly. The assignment was misaligned on purpose. There were three parts to the submission, if you remember correctly. There was a lesson plan, an assessment, and the 3-TAC3 scoring rubric. But the rubric for the assignment itself really only aligned with two of those parts. The knowledge and understanding section at the beginning of the rubric during the assignment was especially confusing. In the assignment, it wasn't really clear whether it was meant to be addressed in the lesson plan or in the assessment task or in the scoring rubric. And so I saw students respond in a variety of ways. Some students try to force it into the lecture structure. Others actually created a fourth new type submission to try and fulfill what they thought was needed within this assignment. And the effort didn't go unnoticed. But here's what I want you to hear. This lack of clarity, most likely for all of you, created stress. And when we're stressed, something fascinating and very real happens in our brains. When the assignment feels unclear, when it is misaligned, your brain doesn't go, let's logically ask for help. Instead, your amygdala fires up, and that's the emotional response center of your primitive brain, and the stress response from it overrides your prefrontal cortex, where logical problem solving and decision making take place. So instead of reaching out to clarify with me, right, like I had even talked about in the video, many of you likely experienced fight, flight, or freeze. Maybe you powered through the task the best you could, maybe you froze and did nothing, or maybe you submitted something just to get it done. And that's normal, that's human, and that's neuroscience. But that's also why we're here, because this is one of the dilemmas of teaching. The question is, do you want to be right, i.e. what you did as a teacher is perfect and any errors or misunderstanding are due to the student's engagement, or do you want to be effective where you sit back and look at what you did and adjust it until the students are able to be successful? That's the tension that teachers face when assessing students. The danger of being so committed to our own righteousness, our vision of what's fair or accurate or intellectually sound, that we stop noticing what's actually needed in our room. As teachers, we've all been there. When a lesson flops or an assessment returns wildly inconsistent in its results, our instinct is often to blame the students. And you may see this in some of your courses or some of the courses you've had throughout your life. Teachers will say things like, well, the students, they didn't read the instructions, or the students, they just didn't try, or the students were lazy. Right? For example, with last week's assignment, a teacher might have looked at the 3 disconnected submissions that you had submitted and said, these students didn't follow the rubric, or they didn't think critically, or, I told them in the video exactly what it was and to contact me if they had any questions. But that kind of response isn't about learning. It's about preserving the self-image of being right. So if I approach it that way, that's what I'm doing. It is easier to point the finger than to admit, you know what? My rubric didn't match my prompts, or my assessment categories were vague, or they're not aligned. That's where self-justification creeps in. Self-justification tells us that because our intentions were good, I'm a good teacher and I had good intentions, that our execution must also be good. But as educators, our job isn't to defend our design, our job is to evolve it. So when student work doesn't quite meet the mark, your egos may say the students didn't listen, but our role as educators asks us to say, how might I redesign this for better clarity, support, or access? And that's the question that will move us as teachers forward. This is where self-justification creeps in. It feels like reflection, but it isn't. Self-justification is when we start defending our original choices instead of learning from them. We rationalize instead of revise. But real reflection says, what could I have done differently? What will I do next time? And this is what you're going to be needing to think about all week. And so I modeled that here. I designed an assessment that was designed to cause confusion, that was misaligned. And yet no one reached out. Not because you don't care, but because of the stress of not knowing likely blocked the very decision-making system that would have led to you asking. If you've had me in AP psychology, or not in AP psychology, if you've had me in educational psychology or intro education, you'll remember a game or an activity we did called Flying Tacos, where I cause a lot of stress and no one asked questions about the directions or the colors or what they can use. This is the same here. A lack of clarity, a lack of alignment creates stress for students. And because that stress of not knowing blocks the very decision-making system that would lead students to asking questions, right? It's a problem within the system. You know, simple biology why this happens. And that's why in week 6, not this week, but next week, we're going to revise the submission, the assignment we submitted, Applied Learning 2, together. You're going to revise your lesson plan, you're going to update your assessment, and then you're also going to create 3 more assessments for differentiating versions for SPED, TAG, and ELL. But this week we're going to sort of pivot. This week is about seeing what a fully structured, intentionally differentiated lesson looks like, and using it as a mirror, not as a measuring stick, not to critique yourselves, but to grow. So I need you to stay open, stay honest, and let go of needing to be right and keep learning to become more effective, because we're going to take it step by step. And when you're learning to be more effective, what's going to happen is I ask you to look at your lesson plan that you created using the Graceland template. In the next video, I'm going to directly challenge what some of you submitted. Right? Some of us might say, oh, this was just fine, or this is what I've been taught, and all that kind of stuff. And they're not willing to open up and change and listen to the ideas, right? That's the dilemma. Are we interested in being right? What we submitted was perfect and all the other stuff isn't important? Or are we interested in being more effective, which the next video is going to cover?